The most foolish man in the Bible. Nabal is notable for his meeting with David while David was fleeing King Saul. Following Samuel's death, David relocated to the barren wilderness. He came to shepherds tending the sheep of the affluent Nabal, an arrogant, unpleasant, and combative man. Nabal was married to Abigail, a beautiful, clever, and intuitive woman, and his brilliant wife spared his terrible life. As chapter 25 begins, Israel is dealt a blow. Samuel has died. The prophet who anointed Israel's first king, Saul, and future monarch David, was no longer among us. He was so revered that all of Israel gathered to grieve for him at his home in Ramah. The last of Israel's justices had served in a unique capacity. Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. And it came about while he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. And the woman was intelligent and beautiful in appearance, but the man was harsh and evil in his dealings, and he was a Calebite. That David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel, visit Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus shall you say, Have a long life, peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. Now I have heard that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we have not insulted them, nor have they missed anything all the days they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we have come on a festive day. Please give whatever you find at hand to your servants and to your son David." 1 Samuel chapter 25 verses 2-8. David traveled to Maon, the residence of a wealthy man named Nabal and his wife Abigail. Her spouse was as nasty and evil as she was intelligent and lovely. David and his soldiers protected Nabal's herds without being obligated to do so. When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. Then they waited. Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse?" Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I've slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where? David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, "Each of you, strap on your sword." So they did, and David strapped his on as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day they were a wall around us the whole time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him." 1 Samuel chapter 25 verses 9-17. Nabal, as is his way, insulted David's troops. Such ingratitude and insult, according to David, deserved vengeance. Apparently, Nabal's character was an open topic of discussion in the household, because this servant didn't hesitate to point it out to the lady of the house. He is such a helpless fool, nobody can talk to him. Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, "Go on ahead, I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said, "It's been useless. All my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him." 1 Samuel chapter 25 verses 18 to 22. Abigail knew her husband. Therefore she knew the servant was correct. Nabal means fool or stupid in Hebrew. The name was appropriate. Abigail needed to act quickly if she was to keep a calamity from destroying their home. Innocent lives would be lost if she did not intervene, and David would come to regret his actions. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. And now, my lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my lord be like Nabal. And let this gift, which your servant has brought to my lord, be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for my lord every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed, or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my lord success, remember your servant." 1 Samuel chapter 25, verses 23 to 31. Abigail treated David as though he were a king. She admitted that Nabal's name fit his personality. He was a worthless fool who knew nothing but foolishness. David would one day become king of Israel. If David refrained from vengeance on that day, there would be no guilt or troubled conscience because of needless bloodshed. David said to Abigail, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment, and for keeping me from bloodshed this day, and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak." Then David accepted from her hand which she had brought him and said, "Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request." 1 Samuel chapter 25, verses 32 to 35. Abigail was worth her weight in gold in David's opinion. Her foresight had saved her family and kept David from killing innocent people. Abigail exemplifies the woman of excellence character mentioned in Proverbs chapter 31, verse 10. She didn't let her husband's folly keep her from fearing and following the Lord. She was a true princess, and she would soon see the fruit of her effort. Proverbs chapter 31, verses 29 to 31. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk, so she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. 1 Samuel chapter 25, verses 36 to 38. This story concludes with a twist. After saving the day, Abigail returned home to find a drunken husband who had no idea how close he had been to death. When Nabal finally woke up and Abigail told him everything, from what we can tell in the modern day, it seemed that Nabal suffered a stroke or heart attack, as the Bible says. His heart died and he turned into stone. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong, and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head." Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. The servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, "David has sent us to come to you to take you to become his wife." She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, "I am your servant, and am ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants." Abigail quickly got on a donkey, and attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife. David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they both were his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who was from Galim. 1 Samuel chapter 25, verses 39 to 44. Although his actions were plainly designed to honor this godly woman, David was already married. God's ideal for his people was never polygamy. In David's instance, polygamous marriage would result in horrible family disintegration, causing him a great deal of suffering. When Nabal angered David, Abigail acted immediately to defuse the situation. She prepared a lavish feast and set out to see David. The decisive acts of Abigail met the immediate requirement of feeding David's warriors. They also calmed David and turned his attention away from vengeance. Abigail was a living example of the law of connection. When Abigail returned home, she kept her cool and decided not to deal with Nabal until he was sober. Abigail answered directly and respectfully, despite her husband's rudeness and inappropriate actions. Later, God avenged David by removing Nabal from the situation. This encounter stayed with David. He recognized a godly woman when he saw one, and after Nabal died, he chose Abigail to be his wife. During difficult times, her patience and submission, as well as her intellect and problem-solving abilities, prepared her to be a great wife to David. David admired Abigail's power and was drawn to the skilled female leader. Abigail's 4 powerful lessons about serving others. Number 1. Maintain your cool. Don't be a Martha hostess. Martha of Bethany will be remembered as an angry, anxious hostess who was preoccupied with the food, yet unsympathetic to her guests. She was cruel to her sister Mary and furious in the kitchen. Consider this. She had Jesus over for dinner, yet she sought to chastise Jesus. Number 2. Be godly. You will be generous if you spend time adoring God, first and foremost. Festivities can be stressful. Be considerate of your visitors. Request that God show you their emotional needs. The path to one's heart does not go via the stomach, but rather through the heart. Number 3. Be realistic. You will make errors. People can be rowdy. Expect nothing less than mediocrity. Every family gathering contains both excellent and terrible apples. Number 4. Be generous. Being generous is a very remarkable trait for a person to hold. So how will you channel a little Abigail this Thanksgiving? I encourage you to be your own hostess, letting God guide your heart. Ask people to name their favorite Bible person, and you'll almost certainly hear the name Abigail. She single-handedly saved her family from potential ruin due to her uncommon bravery, common sense, and exceptional interpersonal abilities. Her husband, on the other hand, almost caused the slaughter of his entire family. Nabal's name means fool, and he certainly lived up to it. He was a guy without discernment who refused to provide for David and his warriors. An angry David collected his warriors and planned to slaughter every male in Nabal's house, except for Abigail. Take note of the interpersonal lessons she gives us. Relationship lessons from Abigail. Number 1. Risky initiative. Abigail took the initial move in resolving a sticky situation with David. Number 2. Emotional security. Abigail demonstrated inward security in her identity. Number 3. Genuine humility. Abigail submitted to David by falling at his feet and seeking his favor. Number 4. Personal responsibility. Abigail took responsibility for Nabal and explained his wicked behavior. Number 5. Selfless attitude. Abigail was entirely focused on David's well-being and future success. Number 6. Generous spirit. Abigail's generous spirit. Abigail gave David and his men a thoughtful present for their journey. Number 7. Forthright approach. Abigail requested David directly to pardon Nabal. Number 8. Quick wit. Abigail suggested David didn't want a slaughter on his conscience. Number 9. Eternal perspective. Abigail saw David and their relationship from a divine viewpoint. Number 10. Kind affirmation. Abigail saw David's benefit and spoke encouraging words to him. The stuff good relationships are made of. Influential leaders grow their relational skills in the following manner. Leaders who are effective have a leader's head, understand people. Abigail knew how to appeal to David in order to accomplish her goal. Influential leaders have a leader's heart, love people. Abigail assumed the role of a servant, submitting to both David and her husband. She felt secure enough to serve. Effective leaders have a leader's hand, help people. Abigail gave David and his men what they needed. She added value to him and thereby saved the life of her family. Nabal's wife excelled in relationships, but he floundered. Their marriage demonstrates that opposites do indeed attract. As David and his men prepared to travel through Nabal's farm, David dispatched a few men ahead to ask Nabal if he could spare anything: food, wool, drinks, whatever. They weren't picky. But Nabal would not even give them the time of day. He growled loudly and insulted them as he walked away. What a moron. Nabal should have known that David had delivered his people from the clutches of Goliath and the Philistines. He should have known that the prophet Samuel had anointed David as the next king of Israel. He should have known that David had long guarded Nabal's men and property. But it didn't matter to Nabal if he knew any of these things. Nabal continued to refuse to reciprocate David's favor. So, was Nabal a criminal? Did he commit any illegal or immoral acts? Not at all. His lack of people skills completely undermined his leadership. Nabal is a model for many pastors and leaders today. We, like Nabal, become so preoccupied with our own work and personal lives that we overlook the sole everlasting resource on our planet: people. How did Nabal fail to develop healthy interpersonal skills? Why did Nabal fail? Number 1. Nabal got affluent and content and did not believe he needed to form relationships. Number 2. Nabal grew egotistical and distrustful of people. He was unable to overcome his evil temperament. Number 3. Nabal never provided nor received encouragement. He had become numb to good attitudes. Number 4. Nabal forgot how others had blessed him in the past. He counted only his losses. Number 5. Nabal belittled people and forgot their names. His insecurity prevented generosity. Number 6. Nabal saw no reason to help others. He suffered from self-centered motives. Number 7. Nabal wanted to build only his own kingdom, not God's. Do you or someone you know experience symptoms similar to these? Relationship skills are essential in God's kingdom. In 2 phrases, Jesus summarized the kingdom. Number 1, love God with your whole heart. And number 2, love your neighbor as yourself. Our faith is not centered on some sterile dogma or doctrine, though creeds are nevertheless vital. Faith is built on relationships, both vertical with God and horizontal with others. It all comes down to relationships. 4 word pictures. What could Nabal have done to improve his relational skills? He could have started by embracing the following word pictures. Number 1, the host. We are to host the relationships in our life in the same way that a host takes the initiative and makes a guest feel at ease in their house. Number 2, the doctor. Just as a doctor does not prescribe medication without first making a diagnosis, we are to prod others with inquiries so that our solutions match the appropriate need. Number 3, the counselor. An effective counselor actively listens. Because people's number 1 emotional need today is to be understood, we must improve our listening abilities. Number 4, the tour guide. You hire a tour guide to assist you in reaching your goal. God wants us to be spiritual tour guides for others, assisting them in reaching their full potential.